He described their recent treachery and said they were an evil culture that could find no favor with the gods.
We are losing objective.
And so it is with you. Victory is your goal, not ignorance and balance. Use the rhetoric of war to heighten the stakes and stimulate the spirit. Reversal. Always keep the search for and use of enemies under control. It's clarity you want, not paranoia. It is the downfall of many tyrants to see an enemy indifferent. They lose their grip on reality and become hopelessly embroiled in emotions their paranoia churns up. Also, aware of polarizing people so complete that you cannot back off. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a master polarizer, always looking at their own plans, but these too were merely variants of the tactics of Frederick the Great. Discussion turned into argument. Several weeks went by. Finally, King had to step in and create a compromise strategy that would say, instead, do whatever you can to blot it from your mind. Ted Williams, perhaps based on
we have lost objective
past
apples.
Successes are just an obstacle. Every battle, every war is different. You cannot assume that what worked before will work today. You must cut yourself loose from the past and open your eyes to the present. The tendency to fight the last war may lead to your final war. Keys to warfare. In looking back on an unpleasant or disagreeable experience, the thought immediately occurs to us, if only we had said or done X instead of Y. If only we could do it over. Even Prince Hohenlohe, years later, could see how he had botched the retaking of Bitz and Heiligen. The problem, though, is not that we think of the solution only when it's too late. The problem is that we imagine that knowledge is what was lacking. If only we had known more. If only we had thought it through more thoroughly. That is precisely the wrong approach. What makes us go astray in the first place is that we are unattuned to the present moment, insensitive to the circumstances. We are listening to our own thoughts, reacting to things that happened in the past, applying things and ideas digested long ago, but that have nothing to do with our predicament. More books, theories, understand. The greatest general, the most creative strategists, stand out not because they have more knowledge, but because they are able, when necessary, to drop their preconceived notions and focus intensely on the present moment. That is how creativity is sparked and opportunities are seized. Knowledge, experience, and theory have limitations. No amount of thinking in advance will prepare you for the chaos of life, for the infinite possibilities of the moment. The great philosopher of war, Karl von Clausewitz, called this friction, the difference between our plans and what actually happens. Since friction is inevitable, our minds have to be capable of keeping up with the change and adapting to the unexpected. The better we can adapt our thoughts to changing circumstances, the more realistic our responses to them will be. The more we lose ourselves in pre-digested theories and past experiences, the more inappropriate and delusional our response. It is valuable to analyze the past, but it is far more important to develop the capacity to think in the moment. In that way, you will make far fewer mistakes to analyze. Think of the mind as a river. The faster it flows, the better it keeps up with the present and responds to change. The faster it flows, also, the more it refreshes itself and the greater its energy. Obsessional thoughts, past experiences, whether traumas or successes, and preconceived notions are like boulders or mud in this river, settling and hardening and damming it up. The river stops moving. Stagnation sets in. You must wage constant war on this tendency of mind. The first is simply to be aware of the process and of the need to fight it. The second is to adopt the few tactics that might help you to restore the mind's natural flow. Re-examine all of your cherished beliefs and principles. When Napoleon was asked what principles of war he followed, he replied that he followed none. His genius was his ability to respond to circumstances, to make the most of what he was given. He was the supreme opportunist. Your only principle, similarly, should be to have no principles. To believe that strategy has inexorable laws or timeless rules is to take up a rigid, static position. That will be your undoing. Be brutal with the past, with tradition, with the old ways of
available near your location.
Declare war on sacred cows and voices of convention in your own dead. Erase the memory of the last war. The last war you fought is a danger. If you are victorious, you will tend to repeat the strategies you just used, for success makes us lazy and complacent. If you lost, you may be skittish, decisive. Do not think about the last war. Instead, do whatever you can to blot it from your mind. Ted Williams, perhaps baseball's greatest pure guy, made a point of always trying to forget his last at-bat. Whether he got a home run or a strikeout right behind him. No two at-bats are the same, even against the same pitcher, and Williams wanted an open mind. He would not wait for the next at-bat to start forgetting. The minute he got back to the dugout, he started focusing on what was happening in the game taking place. Attention to the details of the present was by far the best way to crowd out the past and forget the last war. Keep the mind moving. When we were children, our minds never stopped. We were open to experiences and absorbed as much of it as possible. We learned fast because the world around us excited us. When we felt frustrated or upset, we would find some creative way to get what we wanted, and then quickly forget the problem as something for us to do. All the greatest strategists, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Sashi, were childlike in this respect. Sometimes, in fact, they even acted like children. The reason is simple. Superior strategists see things as they are. They are highly sensitive to dangers and opportunities. Nothing stays the same in life, and keeping up with circumstances as they change requires a great deal of mental ability. Great strategists do not act according to preconceived ideas. They respond to the moment, like children. Their minds are always moving, and they are always excited, curious. They quickly forget the past. The present is much too interesting. Absorb the spirit of the times. Throughout the history of warfare, there have been classic battles in which the past has confronted the future in a hopeless mismatch. In each case, the conquering army developed a way of fighting that maximized a new form of technology or a new social order. You can reproduce this effect on a smaller scale by attuning yourself to the spirit of the times. Developing antennae for the trends that have yet to crest takes work and study, as well as the flexibility to adapt to those trends. As you get older, it is best to periodically alter your style. By constantly adapting and changing your style, you will avoid the pitfalls of your previous wars. Just when people feel they know you, you will change. Reverse course. Relationships often develop a certain tiresome predictability. You do what you usually do. Other people respond the way they usually do, and around it goes. If you reverse course, act in a novel manner, you alter the entire dynamic. Do this every so often to break up the relationship's stale patterns and open it to new possibilities. Think of your mind as an army. Armies must adapt to the complexity and chaos of modern war by becoming more fluid and maneuverable. The ultimate extension of this evolution is guerrilla warfare, which exploits chaos by making disorder and unpredictability a strategy. The guerrilla army never stops to defend a particular place or town. It wins by always moving, staying one step ahead. By following no set pattern, It gives the enemy no target. The guerrilla army never repeats the same tactic. It responds to the situation, the moment, the terrain where it happens to find itself. There is no front, no concrete line of communication or supply, no slow-moving wagon. The guerrilla army is pure mobility. That is the model for your new way of thinking. Apply no tactic rigidly. Do not let your mind settle into static positions, defending any particular place or idea, repeating the same lifeless maneuvers. Attack problems from new angles, adapting to the landscape and to what you're given. By staying in constant motion, you show your enemies no target to aim at. You exploit the chaos of the world instead of succumbing to it. Reversal. There is never any value in fighting the last war. But while you're eliminating that pernicious tendency, you must imagine that your enemy is trying to do the same, trying to learn from and adapt to the present. Err on the side of caution. Be ready. Never let your enemy surprise you.
The army was an experienced elite force, ready for anything.
3. Amidst the turmoil of events, do not lose your presence of mind. The counterbalance strategy. In the heat of battle, the mind tends to lose its balance. Too many things confront you at the same time. Unexpected setbacks, doubts, and criticisms from your own allies. There's a danger of responding emotionally with fear, depression, or frustration. It is vital to keep your presence of mind, maintaining your mental powers whatever the circumstances. You must actively resist the emotional pull of the moment. Stay indecisive, confident, and aggressive no matter what hits you. Make the mind tougher by exposing it to adversity. Learn to detach yourself from the chaos of the battlefield. Let others lose their heads. Your presence of mind will steer you clear of their influence and keep you on course. The hyper-aggressive tactic. Vice Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson, 1758-1805, had been through it all. He had lost his right eye in the siege of Calvi, and his right arm in the Battle of Tenerife. He had defeated the Spanish at Cape St. Vincent in 1797, and had thwarted Napoleon's Egyptian campaign by defeating his navy at the Battle of the Nile the following year. But none of his tribulations and triumphs prepared him for the problems he faced from his own colleagues in the British Navy as they prepared to go to war against Denmark in February 1801. Nelson, England's most glorious war hero, was the obvious choice to lead the fleet. Instead, the Admiralty chose Sir Hyde Parker, with Nelson his second in command. This war was a delicate business. It was intended to force the disobedient Danes to comply with the British-led embargo of shipping military goods to France. Fighter Nelson was calm, this is cool. He hated them. And if he went too far against the Danes, he would produce a diplomatic fiasco. Sir Hyde was an older, more stable, tempered man who would do the job and nothing more. Nelson swallowed his pride and took the assignment, but he saw trouble there. The time was of the essence. The faster the Navy sailed, the less chance the Danes would have to build up their defenses. Ships were ready to sail, but Parker's motto was, everything in good order. It wasn't his style to hurry. Nelson yearned for action. He reviewed intelligence reports, studied maps, and came up with a detailed plan for fighting the Danes. He wrote to Parker urging him to seize the initiative.
Objective apples.
Parker ignored him.
50 attackers remain.
At last, on March 11th, the British fleet set sail. Instead of heading for Copenhagen, however, Parker anchored well to the north of the city's harbor and called a meeting with his captains. According to intelligence reports, he explained, the Danes had prepared elaborate defenses for Copenhagen. Boats anchored in the harbor, forts to the north and south, and mobile artillery batteries could blast the British out of the water. How to fight this artillery without turning? Also, pilots who knew the waters around Copenhagen reported that They were treacherous, places of sandbar and tricky fields. Navigating these dangers under bombardment would be harrowing. With all of these difficulties, perhaps it was best to wait for the Danes to leave harbor and fight them in open sea. Nelson struggled to control himself. Finally, he let loose, pacing the room, the stub of his lost arm jerking as he spoke. No war, he said, had ever been won by waiting. The Danish defenses looked formidable to those who were children, but he had worked out a strategy weeks earlier. He would attack from the south, the easier approach, while Parker and reserve force would stay to the city's north. Nelson would use his mobility to take out the Danish guns. He had studied the maps. Sandbars were no threat. As for the wind, aggressive action was more important than threat of the wind. Nelson's speech energized Parker's captains. He was by far their most successful, and his confidence was catching. Even Sir Hyde was impressed, and the plan was approved. The next morning, Nelson's line of ships advanced on Copenhagen, and the battle began. The Danish guns, firing from the British at close range, took a fierce toll. Nelson paced the deck of his flagship, HMS Elephant, urging his men on. He was in an excited, almost ecstatic state. A shot through the mainmast nearly hit him. It is warm work, and this day may be the last to any of us at any moment, he told the colonel, a little shaken up by the blast. But mark you, I would not be elsewhere for thousands. Parker followed the battle from his position to the north. He now regretted agreeing to Nelson's plan. He was responsible for the campaign, and a defeat here could ruin his career. After 4 hours of back-and-forth bombardment, soon enough, the fleet had taken a beating and had gained no advantage. Nelson never knew when to quit. Parker decided it was time to hoist signal flag 39, the order to withdraw. The first ships to see it were to acknowledge it and pass the signal on down the line. Once acknowledged, there was nothing else to do but retreat. The battle was over. On board the Elephant, a lieutenant told Nelson about the signal. The vice admiral ignored it. Continuing to pound the Danish defenses, he eventually called to an officer. Is number 16 still hoisted? Number 16 was his own flag. It meant engage the enemy more closely. The officer confirmed that the flag was still flying. Mind you, keep it so, Nelson told him. A few minutes later, Parker's signal still flapping in the breeze, Nelson turned to his flag captain. No, Foley, I have only one eye. I have a right to be blind sometimes. And raising his telescope to his blind eye, he calmly remarked, I really do not see the signal. Torn between obeying Parker and obeying Nelson, the fleet captains chose Nelson. They would risk their careers along with his. But soon the Danish defenses started to crack. Some of the ships anchored in the harbor surrendered, and the firing of the guns began to slow. Less than an hour after Parker's signal to stop the battle, the Danes surrendered. The next day, Parker perfunctorily congratulated Nelson on the victory. He did not mention his subordinate's disobedience. He was hoping the whole affair, including his own lack of courage, quietly forgotten. Interpretation. When the Admiralty put its faith in Sir Hyde, it made a classic military error. It entrusted the waging of a war to a man who was careful and methodical. Such men may seem calm, even strong, in times of peace, but their self-control often hides weakness. The reason they think things through so carefully is that they are terrified of making a mistake and of what that might mean for them and their career. This doesn't come out until they're tested in battle, and suddenly they cannot make a decision. They see problems everywhere and defeat in the smallest setback. They hang back, not out of patience, but out of fear. Often these moments of hesitation spell their doom. Presence of mind is a kind of counterbalance to mental weakness, to our tendency to get emotional and lose perspective in the heat of battle. Our greatest weakness is losing heart, doubting ourselves, becoming unnecessarily cautious. Being more careful is not what we need. That is just a screen for our fear of conflict, of making a mistake. What we need is double resolve, an intensification of confidence. That will serve as a counterbalance. In moments of turmoil and trouble, you must force yourself to be more determined. Call up the aggressive energy you need to overcome
We are
caution
losing
and
objective
inertia. Any mistakes you make, you can rectify with more energetic action still. Save your carefulness for the hours of preparation, but once the fighting begins,
We have lost
empty your
objective
mind of
Charlie.
doubts. Ignore those who quail at any setback and call for retreat. Find joy in attack mode. Momentum will carry you through. Keys to warfare. Our minds seem rather strong when we're following our routines. But place any of us in an adverse situation and our rationality vanishes. We react to pressure by growing fearful, impatient, confused. Such moments reveal us for the emotional creatures we are. Under attack, whether by a known enemy or unpredictably by a colleague, our response is dominated by feelings of anger, sadness, betrayal. Only with great effort can we reason our way through these periods and respond rationally. And our rationality rarely lasts past the next attack. Understand, your mind is weaker than your emotions. But you become aware of this weakness only in moments of adversity, precisely the time when you need strength. What best equips you to cope with the heat of battle is neither more knowledge nor more intellect. What makes your mind stronger and more able to control your emotions is internal discipline and toughness. No one can teach you this skill.
Objective butter.
You cannot learn it by reading about it. Like any discipline, it can come only